All right, well, the Mr. Crunch multi-tool is here. So we're going to unbox it, we're going to talk a little bit about the implements, and we're going to do a comparison with the Leatherman Free P4. So let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so since we have it, let's go ahead and use this. Interestingly, the box doesn't say Leatherman like normal Leatherman on it. It says Leatherman Garage, which is kind of interesting. So there we go. Comes in a box like this. Pretty neat. I'll put a picture of this at the end of the video. Okay. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So is there anything that's in this box? Doesn't look like it. That's just the box. That's basically what's in it. For $200, what you get is a cardboard box with a leather sheath saying Leatherman on it, and it's written Mr. Crunch. Here we go. So I can tell you right now, this is a different frame than the Leatherman Free. So let's go ahead and try to get it oriented properly. So different frame for sure. Looks like the scale components are the same, somewhat, just different texturing. And then it has Mr. Crunch written on it. By Leatherman Garage, Portland, Oregon. So we're going to start with the pliers because that's really the most interesting thing. Whoa. Okay. Very interesting. I would have thought there would have been more play if they worked. What a weird shape. So I'm just going to guess here that you open it up that much. Yeah, very clever. And then this folds down and there's a cutout for them. And now you have your blunt nose pliers. Wow, that is weird, but also pretty darn cool. You know, it's funny, having those large cutters, I think is a bit of a problem. So the first thing I would do is I would actually design specific cutters for these that actually have less of the cutter into the gripping area, maybe cutting it right there. Because the standard cutters, they eat up too much of the real estate. I feel like maybe get rid of the hardwired cutters and just have straight cutters. Something like that. Surprisingly though, I kind of like the plier concept though. So how easy is it if I wanted to, oh, I can't get it out. Interesting. Once they're tucked in, like, how do you get this thing out? Okay, you can kind of do it. But, let's see. So I'd have to, okay. Oh, interesting. I'll tell you what, that is pretty amazing action. I can see why Tim Leatherman would have had issues trying to develop this and come to mass production back in the late 80s. Making that would have been very expensive. I think you would have had to do it basically by hand. The only thing is though, by doing this, you don't have very much of a needle nose, right? Even compared to the original Plier Head. It's not all that fine. So I'm not sure what the major advantage is. I mean, what you're basically saying here is that there's just some nuts that you can't access with all that extra metal. So by having this, you can actually get basically flush into a nut and rotate it. And there is something to be said for this. I think as far as the plier is concerned, I think there's a lot of merit to this concept. What I would need to know is the needle nose, are these sections good enough to really do the job? Because they're clearly cast steel, right? Otherwise, how would you make them? You can even see the marks where they were taken off. Interesting. Now, if I take these off, let me take these off again, and if I close it, like so, what happens when I open it again? Ooh, okay, that's really cool. So you saw how it actually, so if I do that, and I like mess around with this, and then I close it up. All right, that is quite neat. I'm not gonna lie. Now let's go ahead and take a look, because there are some new implements on this thing that are not present on the normal tools. Now this P4 has been modified, so bear with me on that one. So the first new implement is this chisel. It's pretty sharp. It's at least located appropriately, because if you were going to use this, likely you would go like that. But if you were trying to actually cut a section out like you would with a normal chisel, I don't know how effective that is going to be. But if you're going upside down and you're scraping something, yeah, I could see that. What I don't understand is it really that much more useful than this? Because the flat edge of this can do the scraping just fine. Like if you had to take stickers off or something, you could do it. Do I think this is all that functional? Not really. I'm very thankful they didn't put a hybrid blade here. It is a straight blade. Then the other side, well, that's really loose. It's interesting. It doesn't feel very strong. There's almost no retention. That's not a good design. And they could have done, what they could have done here is actually had it basically come in contact just like the scissors do. See that? The different tang shapes. So this has a different tang shape. You see how it comes in contact with the spring? Whereas this is the same shape as these. So because of the cast steel or for whatever reason, there's just not a lot of retention here. But it looks like it uses a standard precision bit that is present on a lot of the other multi-tools like the Wave and the Charge, etc. So that's something. I think that's the only other proprietary component. The rest are basically pretty standard. I have never liked these inner tools on something heavy duty. However, I will admit the one thing I do like quite a bit is this Reamer awl with a small flathead. I did find that this does not really deserve any modification. It is actually quite useful, and surprisingly does a decent job drilling holes even with that small flathead, which is really kind of interesting. The rest of the tools, including the can opener, well, I don't want to get into that right now, but interesting. So this tool is really thick. So I'm wondering, thickness wise, is it any different than the Free series? No, it's the same, it appears. Interesting. There's a lot of flexibility in how this tool set can be arranged, because it looks like, yes, you can have long tools and have them separated by springs, but it seems like you can set them up in a whole bunch of different orientations, which they're showing here. I don't think the P series was necessarily bad. The problem is that without having contact with the spring, even just for a little bit at the beginning, what ends up happening is this. Let's see if I can illustrate with mine. No, I didn't do it. I think I've adjusted mine. Let's see if I can do it again. All right. And when you lock it in place, because the magnetic retention is the only thing holding them in, they will pop out. Let's see if that happens with the Leatherman Mr. Crunch. Yes, it does. And as I expected, because there was almost no retention, it is specifically bad with the precision bit. See that? And that is because there's no spring retention. It's all magnetic retention. The humorous part is that the long tools actually have spring retention. If you look at the initial part of the opening, you can see how it touches the spring at the very beginning, which pulls it back in, right? In truth, you could get rid of the magnet entirely with these inner tools and use only springs. The only problem then you would have is you would have a problem keeping the tool closed. You would have to find some different form of latch. So they created more problems, I think, with that magnet than they needed to. But as far as the plier head, I think the real amazing part here is the plier head. The plier head is definitely something I've never seen before, and surprisingly looks like it will work. Now, what I do not know, and I'm skeptical about, is whether these needle nose are going to actually be strong enough to take some real abuse. And the truth is, and I think it's pretty clear, that no one who gets this tool is ever going to put it under enough pressure to really determine whether that's the case or not. While we're at it, let's just check out the weight in here. $260 grams or 9 1/8 ounces. So it's just heavier than the free P4, which is 8 1/2 ounces. So about ½ ounce heavier. Certainly feels it. Well, that's our very first look, okay? So we'll be doing another video about this, and we'll be talking about what I'm going to end up doing with this. I do think the fact that this has no spring retention is a really big problem, and it seems like since they were doing the design to begin with, there is no excuse for this. I can't even feel any magnetic retention on this thing, so basically it's free floating. Free floating. Not a very good design. Real lazy, in my opinion, especially on a tool like this. It should have had the same tang shape as this. All they had to do is copy and paste and copy the same tang that is present on the scissors. And yes, it did have the scissors. I forgot to show it. So that part I think is really lazy. The chisel's cool. Chisel's cool. It's kind of hard to get it out, but interestingly, the chisel, I just realized, has the difference in the tang design. See, it's really obvious here. See that? It interacts with that spring. So it makes it kind of hard to get it out, if we're being honest. Like, it's actually a bit harder than the other tools. And do you see that popping out when you squeeze the handles? Of course not. Of course not. So, look, this architecture has the ability to fix those problems. All they have to do is change the tang. They don't have to go completely like these outer implements, but they should have at the very least have it connect with that spring just a little bit at the beginning, and that would keep it from popping out and would just pull it back in without any need for magnets. One of the fundamental problems with the Free series, which by the way would have been found immediately in pre-production had they allowed other people to test the tool. They would have discovered that problem instantaneously and probably would have had the ability to change it. So, cool, I will admit, but it's not something that I'm going to keep in my collection because it's not something I'm going to use long term. So when we do the formal review where I actually go through this tool, we will talk about what we're going to do with the Mr. Crunch. Well, thanks for watching. This is our first look at the Mr. Crunch multi-tool, and we'll talk again soon.